to The Edge, where we'll take an in-depth analysis of today's top stories by looking beyond the edge. We'll bring you not just the facts, but also deep insights into the topics with expert opinions and social media reactions. Let's make a start with our look beyond the edge. Germany's Social Democrats and its potential partners say that initial coalition talks have gone well. The leader of the Conservative bloc seeking to stay in office hinted that he might resign after a poor election showing. The SPD, the Greens and the FDP began talks on Thursday and after reporting progress have said that they will reconvene on Monday. So how long will the coalition talks take and will Armin Laschet resign? Bahrain, Russia and other members of the UN Human Rights Council pushed through a vote to shut down the body's war crimes investigations in Yemen. A stinging defeat for Western states who sought to keep the mission going. Members narrowly voted to reject a resolution led by the Netherlands to give the independent investigators another 2 years to monitor atrocities in Yemen's conflict. What does the end of this investigation mean for the war in Yemen? A suicide bomb tore through a mosque in Afghanistan's northeastern Kunduz province, killing and wounding scores of people. Recent attacks have underscored security challenges for the Taliban, which took over the country in August. While the country is also grappling with a liquidity crisis as assets remain frozen in the United States. How can Afghanistan overcome the crises it faces? So these are the top 3 stories that we'll be taking a look at today from Beyond the Edge. Let's get started. German politics have a reputation for being staid, predictable and even boring, but not this time. This was an election on a knife edge, with Germany's 2 main political parties jostling for the lead. Our following infographic has more. Armin Laschet, the leader of Merkel's CDU party and Chancellor candidate for the Conservative bloc, signalled he would be willing to resign if it would facilitate rival coalition talks between his bloc, the Greens, and the FDP.
The head of the Christian Democrats, North Rhine-Westphalia state, Governor Armin Laschet, said that he will propose calling a party conference in the coming weeks to determine its future leadership. Laschet, who was the Union bloc's candidate for Chancellor, did not say whether he would run to keep his party leadership post, but spoke of the need to have new personalities to make a fresh start.
Und ich wäre froh, wenn das in dieser schwierigen Phase für die Partei gelingen würde, dass wir mit neuen Persönlichkeiten einen Neuanfang machen.
Laschet also continued to advocate the Jamaica Alliance, a coalition between the Union bloc, the Green Party and the Free Democrats.
Die CDU steht weiter für Jamaika bereit. Wir arbeiten das Wahlergebnis bereits jetzt in der nächsten Zeit intensiv auf. Und die personelle Neuaufstellung der CDU vom Vorsitzenden über das Präsidium bis hinein in den Bundesvorstand werden wir ebenfalls zügig anpacken.
Germany's centre-left Social Democratic Party, the Green Party and the Free Democrats, meanwhile, said that they will deepen their talks next week on forming a new government.
And to discuss the latest situation, I'm joined live from Berlin in Germany by political analyst and SETA Berlin coordinator Zafer Mesher. Zafer, thank you so much for joining us again here today on The Edge. The election was 2 weeks ago. It was a colourful election, and the colours are playing out still with traffic lights and Jamaicas being talked about. These are terms for the possible coalition groupings that could be made out. Well, how are discussions progressing at this moment from your perspective?
Hi, Andy. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Well, since yesterday, as it was mentioned, Germany could be moving closer towards a new government with the center-left Social Democrats, the environmentalist Green Party, and the neoliberal Free Democrats, holding their first three-way talks to explore a possible coalition. We can at least realize that the political pendulum has swung toward the traffic light coalition since yesterday. The secretary generals of the parties, of all three parties, gathered yesterday together in Berlin to figure out if they would like to enter a coalition negotiation, and agreed following us 7 hours of pre-exploration to start with the exploratory talks on next Monday.
I'm sure that with this new page open, that whoever's going to come to power is anxious to start ruling. Well, why is it that these coalition talks have taken so, from the outside, it looks as though they've taken so long to begin? 2 weeks has passed since the election. In many countries, they hold an election one day, and the next day or a couple of days later, the new leader is in power. Why does this process take so long?
Just a reminder, the exploratory talks took in 2017 6 months.
Right.
Right, you know. Well, the factor is, of course, one of the main reasons is the Christian Democrats. Regarding them, I would say business as usual, as we heard LASCHET. The center-right Christian Democrats, once a byword for stability, is now looking for its fourth figurehead in 3 years, a la Game of Thrones, you know, and the stage has been set for a ruthless contest between at least 3 candidates to the throne, to stick on Game of Thrones, with leaking internals, intriguous, chaotic communication, etc. Because of that, there is immense lack of trust and reliability, you know, by the two union parties towards the Christian Democrats, indeed. And LASCHET stopped short of throwing in the towel and stepping aside due to the intense pressure to quit after he led the Conservatives to its worst election results since the Second World War, coming in after the center-left Social Democrats. Nevertheless, he said, as we could also hear, that his party is still seeking a three-way coalition with the FDP and the Greens. However, he also made it clear that the CDU-led government with an alternative chancellor to himself was a possibility. Means he puts himself in this position at that time. Well, coming back to the beginning of the exploratory talks on Monday, because what we had yesterday was a pre-exploratory talks among the secretary generals of the party, and usually they're at the stage you will find the chairman of the parties, you know. But since Olaf Scholz is the chancellor's candidate, but not the chairman of the party, so when it comes to a trilateral appearance on the stage, then there are only the secretary generals are entering. Otherwise, Scholz would be not in the picture because he is not the chairman of the party, you know.
Right. So a very complicated situation.
It's really the case. Well, when we look for or have a foresight for the Monday's talks, there are fundamental differences in the party's platforms. The FDP is against the SPD and Greens' plan to raise taxes on the wealthiest to deal with the pandemic and the resulting national debt. And at first glance, the Liberals appear also at odds with the climate policy of the Social Democrats and the Greens, which envisions a stronger government hand. The FDP, always in its own tradition, wants market-driven solution to the climate crisis, also is insisting on keeping the discipline on the budget and not increasing debts of the country. And where we see, I would say, where they are most aligned is the foreign and security policy. The potential coalition members agree on maintaining a strong partnership with the United States and NATO, including when it comes to confronting China, Russia, and Iran. Mm-hmm. Differences remain over certain points, such as the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline between Russia and Germany. The Green Party has a different, and the Liberals, they want to prevent Russia from using the gas pipeline as a weapon against the European Union. On the other hand, the Social Democrats, especially governing in the state where the Nord Stream ends, have an immense interest in the Nord Stream 2.
So would they be more naturally allied then with the CDU, or is there the sense that this is an opportunity to sweep the years of rule of the CDU aside and bring in a fresh start and give the politicians who haven't had a leading role the chance to take forwards?
Well, both parties, both union parties, have already stated that it is not only exclusive with the Social Democrats that they have the exploratory talks, but they changed the strategy. The first strategy was to simultaneously, the same time to negotiate with both parties. Right. But after the chaos within the Christian Democrats, they decided first to start with the Social Democrats and will. At the end of the day, when the exploratory talks with the Social Democrats are at a certain stage, then the Christian Democrats will jump in. The strategy here is it may take quite a long time, so that maybe the Christian Democrats have a new leader. You know, this is the strategy. You know why? Because within the CDU, the other influential conservative politicians want to be part of a government, but not with LASCHET. Right. That's the issue.
So, if LASCHET were to stand aside, do you think that would give the CDU a chance to come back and keep the helm?
Yes, at least it will give all three parties a new momentum on discussing all the issues on the table, where they have really there is alignment between stronger alignment between the Liberals and the Christian Democrats than the Green Party and the Social Democrats have. That's why it is still it's not yet out of game. The Christian Democrats are not out of game.
So we're looking ahead for a stormy ride. Just very finally, very quickly. So at this point, there is no clear way forwards that we can predict yet, is there? How long do you think this will carry on for? Will it be another 6-monther?
No, it won't, because the situation is very serious with Germany. Because the public is, the people, the voters are very aware of a very critical stage in the history of Germany to start a fresh chapter in the politics. And the longer it will take, the more pessimistic, the more the possibility of lack of trust into the policy in Germany in politics. That's why all parties are really very interested in coming to conclusion, or to say, well, it's not possible to find a compromise, which a painful compromise. You know, you need a painful compromise in order to bring all eggs in the basket. So this is something where they are also under pressure. So because they have not the luxury of 3, 4, 5 months to come to at a certain point to form a government, but they have to hurry.
Right.
Up.
And of course, each is looking for their way forward to the future. Zafer Meshe, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll keep watching avidly. No doubt we'll be talking again. Now, unlike many other European countries where the president or monarch invites one party leader to try to form a government, in Germany it's up to the parties themselves to decide who should ally with whom. Their decisions will determine Germany's political future after 16 years with Merkel at the helm. Its appetite to share Europe's largest economy for the digital era and the extent of its willingness to engage with allies on global issues. The coming weeks, or perhaps months, will show how the coalition talks progress. For now, let's move on to our next topic to speak about the war in Yemen, where the humanitarian crisis is worsening day by day. But how did everything start, and how is the international community reacting to the crisis? Here's more in our infographic. The United Nations has ended an investigation into possible war crimes during the years-long Yemeni war.
The results of the recorded votes are as follows: 18 in favour, 21 against, and 7 abstentions. Draft proposal L11 is therefore rejected.
The United Nations Human Rights Council narrowly agreed on Thursday to end the mandate of its independent investigators, who have found that all sides in Yemen's conflict have committed acts that may amount to war crimes. The stinging defeat of a Western resolution, brought by a small group of countries led by the Netherlands, marked the first time that any resolution was wholly rejected in the forum's 15-year history. Saudi Arabia lobbied heavily against the Western resolution that would have extended by 2 years the mandate of the independent team that has documented possible war crimes in Yemen, including by the Riyadh-led coalition.
The group of eminent experts is the UN's only international, independent and impartial mechanism working to monitor all human rights violations and abuses perpetrated by all parties to the conflict in Yemen. It does so with integrity and impartiality. Its reporting is a lifeline between the people of Yemen and this council. This is why we are calling again for the renewal of its mandate and urge all council members to support this initiative. Yemen cannot wait.
During the debate, Yemen's ambassador said that the UN experts had shown themselves to be biased and unprofessional, and that their work complicated the situation as a National Human Rights Commission was in place. Saudi Arabia's delegation did not take the floor.
We've made clear during this session that we are concerned about the reports of serious and wide-ranging human rights violations and abuses by all parties to the conflict. We continue to urge the parties involved to investigate these allegations and to take action to promote and protect human rights. And we do believe that the group of eminent experts on Yemen has a crucial role to play in providing reporting to this Council on the actions of all parties. And we hope that all parties will continue to cooperate with the group in future.
And to discuss this, I'm joined live from Sana'a in Yemen by Nasir Shakir, who's a Yemeni journalist. Nasir, thank you so much for joining us again here today on The Edge. The United Nations Human Rights Council has voted to end the mandate to investigate strong evidence of war crimes. Has the international community failed Yemen?
Thank you, Andy, for having me. I think the international community has failed the people of Yemen, not from the day or from yesterday when they voted against extending the mission of the panel experts, but I think before that, because Yemen is under restrictions and civilians are continuing to pay the price of the war, and people cannot travel from Sana'a or South Sana'a. Yemen is divided into different parts, for example, the north, the south, and the middle, and the movement of civilians cannot go easily. Or warring sides are targeting civilians, and as I told you, the price of war is continuing. So I think, of course, the international community has added the failing of the people of Yemen by this voting against or allow the warring sides to target civilians without any even scrutiny.
Now, there has been a lot of evidence gathered of war crimes, and the Human Rights Chief, Michel Bachelet, said that parties to the conflict continue to act with little regard to their obligations under international law. Now, without anybody being brought to account, and maybe these war crimes have happened on different sides of the conflict, but without those responsible being brought to account, does this put off the date when conflict comes to an end in Yemen?
Of course, this is going to complicate the process of the political process that can end the conflict in Yemen, because stopping the panel of experts from working or monitoring the situation in Yemen is going to allow the warring sides to continue directing the civilians or committing war crimes. And those countries that are selling weapons to Saudi Arabia are going to continue selling weapons, because the human rights record is putting pressure on these countries to stop selling weapons to the Saudi coalition that is bombing in Yemen. And also there are countries that have suspended selling weapons to the Saudi coalition, and I think after the stopping of the panel of experts in Yemen, this is going to inspire these countries to resume selling of weapons. And as the panel of experts said, all warring sides are committing war crimes against potential war crimes against civilians, be it the Houthis, be it the Saudi-backed government, be it the South Syrian Transitional Council, be it the Islah Party that is part of the Saudi-backed government. And I think the time has come for the UN to revise its policy on Yemen, because it is only the civilians, it is only the journalists, it is only the normal citizens that are paying the price of the war. And the Western countries are profiting from this war because they are selling weapons.
And war is an ugly thing wherever and whenever it happens. But this particular conflict has seen some horrific things happening. Well, from Yemen, what can you tell us? What are the sort of things that the United Nations and others should continue to investigate? What are these atrocities, from your perspective?
For example, I am very sad for this, for not extending the ban of experts in Yemen, because yesterday Yemen was remembering the Saudi-led coalition attack on the Grand Hall in Sana'a back in October in 2017, when a Saudi-led airstrike, two airstrikes targeted a funeral hall in Sana'a that killed over 100 civilians, okay, that were mourning a death of the father of the interior minister in Sana'a, and the mayor of Sana'a was killed, and a lot of civilians were killed in the two airstrikes. So I think there are several airstrikes that were not investigated, okay, because they were included in the reports of the panel of experts. For example, the bombardment of the school bus children in Dhahyan back in August 2019, and there is a Sanaban wedding party where nearly 100 was killed, and in the school bus, nearly 40 school bus children were killed, and even hospitals back to the UN organizations were attacked in Yemen, and many crimes that I cannot count it.
And I'm sure many that you don't want to think about as well. Now, the Saudi Arabia wasn't one of the countries that was taking part in this vote to throw out the investigation, but there's talk that they lobbied very heavily to stop it. Why particularly do you think Saudi Arabia doesn't want to see justice brought to perpetrators?
You know, after publishing the fourth report by the panel of experts early September, the Saudi or the Kingdom's ambassador to the UN in Geneva stated that the report was politicized, and I quote, politicized, and was misleading because the report stated that the team said the Houthis' missile and drones attacks on civilians, and I quote, on civilians and civilian objects in Saudi Arabia, where they were stated as of a militarily nature, okay, and this is just bothered or angered Saudi Arabia. So the Houthis and the Saudi government, the South Transition Council, were all included in that report. But I think Saudi Arabia is trying to make its picture very good, okay, so that it can sell more weapons from the Western countries. But I see a lot of countries that are selling weapons to Saudi Arabia voted for the group to continue its investigations for the war crimes in Yemen. But Saudi Arabia is not lobbying for against this panel. I think Saudi Arabia is lobbying for against other parties in Yemen, including the Houthis. For example, they don't want the Houthis to have a good relationship, for example, with Oman, or to have a good relations with Iraq, that is have a government that is dominated by Shia, which is a possible way for the Houthis to normalize relations with Iraq, just as they normalize the relations with the Syrian regime that has a good relations with Iran, that is backing the Houthis here in Yemen. So I think Saudi Arabia should allow the panel of experts so that its picture can be good for in front of the Western countries, at least.
Well, Nasir Shakir, all atrocities should be investigated. They must be investigated. This conflict must be brought to an end so that the restoration of the country and aid can be brought to restore life to all those who so badly need it in Yemen. Thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge. Thank you. The vote marked the first time in the Council's 15-year history that a resolution was defeated Activist groups say that more than 100,000 people have been killed and 4 million have been displaced during the long-lasting war in Yemen. We hope that the international community will resume and continue to raise its voice against the humanitarian crisis in Yemen to protect the civilians. But for now, let's move on to our last topic to speak about the recent developments in Afghanistan. The Taliban recently announced its new government, but what do we know about it? Let's take a look about this in our infographic. Worshippers were killed and others wounded in an explosion at a mosque in the north of Afghanistan, where the Taliban face increasing security threats from Daesh.
A powerful explosion in a mosque in northern Afghanistan on Friday has left several casualties. The blast occurred in a mosque in the Kunduz province during the weekly Friday prayer service at the Ghoza-e-Sayad Abad Mosque. Taliban chief spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said the mosque was the target and that a large number of worshippers were killed and wounded. He said Taliban special forces had arrived to the scene and were investigating the incident.
It was around 1:40 p.m. All the Muslims had gathered in the mosque for Friday prayers, and then I heard the explosion. I was nearby, and what I saw was just like the end of the world. Why is this happening to the Muslims? Which religion should we adopt where there is nothing like this and killing Muslims is forbidden? Believe God, I can't even talk anymore. I can't tell you how many dead bodies I have shifted in my vehicle. There was no ambulance. May God have mercy on all Muslims.
The Taliban leadership has been grappling with a growing threat from Daesh. Daesh militants have ramped up attacks to target their rivals, including 2 deadly bombings in Kabul. Daesh has also targeted Afghanistan's religious minorities in attacks.
And to discuss this and the situation in Afghanistan, I'm joined live from Ankara by Gal Luft, who's a security analyst and professor with Ostim Teknik University. Gal, thank you for joining us again here today on The Edge. When we originally arranged to speak with you today, we were going to talk about the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, but then sadly after the Friday prayers, this apparent suicide attack happened. Well, this shows us how the situation in Afghanistan can change in the blink of an eye. What can you tell us about today's events?
Those issues are not unrelated. The humanitarian problem, which will no doubt will get worse. We're entering the winter. There's no money. The health system is collapsing. The civil society organizations are not being funded. So things are going to get worse. And those elements within Afghanistan who want to exploit this situation, and as much as it's hard for this rudimentary government of the Taliban to govern, those ISIS elements are going to make things much, much worse. Their goal is to sabotage the work of the new government and to create a rift within the Afghan society, and to drive the country into a civil war. Now, this is a vacuum that has been created by the fact that the economic situation is made worse by the fact that the international community, although it made substantial pledges, has not been able to create the mechanisms to pump the money into the country. And you know, there are millions of people that need to be serviced. So as long as this gap is the means that are needed for the new government to operate and to govern and to bring and pay salaries, as long as these means do not exist, those fringe elements, just like today, will continue to sow chaos and violence, and this may just get worse.
I can well understand how evil people would want to create chaos, because chaos begets more evil and more atrocities can happen. But that can't be the end game. What are groups like Daesh, who, although they haven't taken responsibility, I believe, yet for this attack, what is their end game? What if they manage to foment a civil war? Beyond the civil war, what are they looking for?
Well, to me, the events like today tell me that the Taliban actually seems to be upholding their pledge or the promise not to allow those terrorist groups into the country. Otherwise, why would those countries want to attack the Taliban?
Right. So
to me, the fact that these kind of attacks are happening is a testimony that the Taliban has probably sent them messages. You're not welcome here. And at this point, those groups became enemies of the Taliban. Of course, Al-Qaeda and Daesh and all these groups would love to come to a lawless country and exploit the possibilities of reconstituting the training camps and launching terrorist attacks all over. And I guess that's my guess is that the Taliban has indicated to them that would not be acceptable, because the Taliban wants to get the international recognition. And the international recognition is contingent on them preventing the comeback of those terrorists. So I think this is what it's all about. And actually, I think the fact that those groups are targeting the Taliban should come to the international community as an indication that the Taliban is actually trying to hold its share of the part of the deal. And that should spark some goodwill on behalf of particularly the United States and the Europeans that are blocking the flow of cash into the country.
Well, and that's interesting. One of the things that Antony Blinken was saying was that the Taliban can earn the trust, the respectability of the world. So perhaps this may be, as you say, there may be some positive in this. If the Taliban can keep their momentum, keep their control and momentum going against these attacks. But from the humanitarian side, the director of the World Food Programme, Mary Ellen McGarthy, has been warning of the dire situation that is exploding in the country. Is it too late for the international community to say, okay, the Taliban, whilst we're still cautious, we need to trust them enough to allow aid to go in more freely? Is this now the time to make that happen?
Of course, it's long overdue. And you know, what is bothering to me is the fact that there has not been any litmus test or any specific demands from the Taliban. They're all kind of vague, very, very unclear objectives. But at some point, the international community, and again, especially the United States and Europe, need to say, okay, what is the passing grade here? What does the Taliban need to do to unleash those funds, to unfreeze some of those funds so that working capital can flow into the country. There need to be sort of like a laundry list, but very specific one, not sort of vague demands without any ability to measure or the implementation, if you will. And as long as these type of standard of achievement are not being clarified to the Taliban and remain at a very amorphic and vague level, the two sides will never agree whether there is a passing grade or not, whether they pass the test or not. And I think I would, based on what I've seen so far, I think it's definitely the time to begin to release some of the money, because it's not about humanitarian aid. You can fly in food, you can fly in medicine, but at some point people need to get paid. If you want a functioning government, people need to make a living. They cannot work for free. They need to be paid. And you cannot trust the NGOs to do this job. You know, the United States and the Europeans have this fantasy that somehow they can govern the country indirectly via the NGOs. Now, the NGOs are doing very important work. I have no disagreement, but they cannot carry the burden of governance alone. There is a government, we like it, we don't like it, but this is the government. And if you suffocate the government, and if you don't give the government the means to exercise its work, and you maintain this freeze, well, you may get a much worse outcome. And I would also add that there are tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that were stolen by the former government, by Ashraf Ghani and his cronies. This money belongs to the Afghan people. And I would urge the United States and its allies to do a better and quicker work to identify this money, to see where this money is hiding, and to freeze this money and seize the money and give it to its rightful owners. Because it's inconceivable to me that those people stole millions of dollars that were handed to them by the American taxpayers and other donors, and they will be living wonderful lives in the Emirates or in Qatar. I don't know where they all fled to, and while the millions of Afghans will starve in the winter. This is immoral, and it's unconscionable, and it has to be addressed very quickly. And the Americans have the means to target this money, to seize the money, and to rectify this situation.
Well, it sounds rather as though the hands-off approach, if we like, to giving waymarks that must be reached to gain this respectability, that the international community hasn't said you must do this to get that. It sounds as though they're still shunning their responsibility. They have a duty to the Afghan people to restore them to full health. Gal Luft, thank you so much for joining us today and drawing all these things to our attention. It's so important that the words of not only Bachelet but also the World Health Organization are heard by the international community, so they take action now rather than later. Afghanistan faces several challenges, including security and the economy. We hope that the country can overcome these challenges to ensure a secure life for its people. Now, our analysts have provided their insights on today's top stories. Let's have a roundup of what they had to say. Before closing our programme, let's take a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions to today's top story shared with the hashtag Afghanistan. And here's what you had to say about Afghanistan on Twitter. Hassan Abedi says 50 Shias in Afghanistan were martyred today when a bomb exploded during Friday prayer. May Allah grant the martyrs of Kunduz the highest rank in paradise. Keep their families and all the oppressed in your du'as. You mustn't stay silent in the face of injustice. And Kashraf Hussain says, alas, a suicide bomber blew himself up at a Shia mosque during Friday prayer in Kunduz, Afghanistan. 100 got killed and more than 200 are wounded. I pray for higher ranks for the martyred ones and steady recovery for those who are wounded. Kunduz, Afghanistan. And Maria Hayat says, a mosque is a place of worship, a holy building, a sanctuary. But this is what Friday prayer looked like today at a Shia mosque in Kunduz. Our prayer mats are covered in innocent blood once again. These terrorists are continuing their massacres. Don't be fooled by their masks. And let's now take a look at our video of the day, in which the UN High Commissioner for Refugees raises awareness for global displacement around the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a difficult period, one where multiple crises erupt or worsen every day. We see this with COVID-19, which has left no corner of the world untouched. We see it in the climate emergency, where our consumption and production to feed an insatiable appetite for more is destroying the one planet we share. Any one of us can see that we are heading in the wrong direction. And of course we see how unchecked and unresolved conflicts drive a devastating rise in the global number of forcibly displaced, a number that has doubled in the last decade. 1 million children have been born into exile in the past 3 years alone. I fear the question will not be if we will reach 100 million forcibly displaced, but rather when. I visited Afghanistan just last month. You have heard me and many others in the 8 communities say that large-scale, unconditional humanitarian assistance must be mobilized now, immediately. We sometimes feel powerless and besieged, but we must not lose heart and take inspiration instead from the courage and resilience which uprooted people continue to show. Think of the refugee athletes who triumphed over every adversity and competed at the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. They're living examples of why we must not give up. None of us can do this alone. But if we work together, with courage and humility, and in a true spirit of solidarity, putting the common good before individual and national considerations, then we have a chance to succeed. Thank you.
And that's all for this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boyns. Stay tuned, as we'll be back next time with more in-depth analysis on the top stories and a look beyond the edge.